Even today, Erwin Rommel remains one of the most recognizable and discussed commanders of the Second World War. He is still widely remembered by the nickname, the Desert Fox, a title given by his enemies as much as by his admirers, earned through daring initiative, speed, and an instinctive grasp of battlefield maneuver during the fighting in North Africa. Rommel's legacy, however, was shaped not only by his military talent, but by a personal choice that very few German generals ever dared to make. He chose, at critical moments, to speak bluntly and honestly to Adolf Hitler about the true course of the war. That honesty, once valued, would ultimately cost him everything. Rommel's son, Manfred, later recalled witnessing his father's complicated and unpredictable relationship with Hitler. In the early years, there was no open conflict between them. Rommel admired Hitler as a fellow veteran of the First World War and initially believed that he was serving Germany rather than a criminal ideology. Over time, however, Rommel's growing awareness of military reality, combined with the regime's increasingly brutal policies, created an internal conflict that he could never fully resolve. His refusal to accept comforting illusions eventually placed him on a collision course with the dictator he once respected. Rommel was a man of contradictions. He was a brilliant tactical and operational leader, especially gifted in mobile warfare, yet often blind to the deeper political and moral nature of the regime he served. He could be kind, generous, and deeply devoted to his family, while also being demanding, overbearing, and at times tyrannical with subordinates. Long before the Second World War, he had already earned fame as a decorated lieutenant during the First World War, where his courage and initiative marked him as an officer of exceptional promise. When Germany's armed forces were severely restricted following the Treaty of Versailles, Rommel chose to remain in uniform rather than leave military life behind. He served first as an instructor, shaping the next generation of officers, and later rose steadily through the ranks. During the mid-1930s, Rommel's career brought him into Adolf Hitler's personal orbit. He served as Hitler's military escort during the annual Nuremberg Party rallies, a position that gave him unusual proximity to the Führer. Promotions followed: captain, major, colonel. As Germany moved toward war, Rommel and Hitler crossed paths repeatedly, especially in the years leading up to the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, the act that launched the Second World War. At this stage, Rommel still accepted Hitler's authority without serious question, seeing him as the leader who had restored Germany's strength and pride after the humiliation of defeat. Rommel's true genius lay in armored warfare. In 1940, Hitler gave him command of the 7th Panzer Division during the invasion of France. Rommel led from the front, pushing his tanks forward with relentless speed, often outrunning his own supply lines and higher headquarters. His division became known as the Ghost Division, because even German command frequently lost track of its position. The campaign ended in stunning victory, with German forces reaching the English Channel in a matter of weeks. Rommel's success brought him rapid promotion, and by February 1941, he had risen to the rank of lieutenant general. It was his next assignment that transformed Rommel into a legend. In early 1941, Hitler sent him to North Africa to stabilize the collapsing Italian position against British forces. Rommel was given command of what became known as the Afrika Korps, initially consisting of 2 panzer divisions. Confident to the point of arrogance, Rommel believed deeply in his own instincts. He possessed a powerful ego, but it was backed by undeniable results. He thrived on action, movement, and risk, and North Africa offered him the perfect stage. At home, Rommel's family life continued under the shadow of war. He and his wife Lucy had one child, Manfred, born in 1928. Like many children in Nazi Germany, Manfred grew up surrounded by propaganda and militarism, but he also saw his father as a devoted and caring parent. Rommel spoke openly with his son, sometimes even expressing doubts about the direction the war was taking. These moments revealed a man capable of reflection, even as he continued to fight with determination for Germany. Hitler's rise to power had transformed Germany in ways few could have predicted. He promised to restore national pride and reverse the perceived injustices of the Treaty of Versailles, tapping into widespread resentment and despair. Many Germans welcomed him as a savior, unaware of the darker ambitions that lay behind his rhetoric. While the nation was swept up in rallies, speeches, and nationalist fervor, something far more sinister was taking shape beneath the surface. For much of the population, including many officers, the true nature of Nazi crimes remained hidden until later in the war. In early 1941, Rommel departed for North Africa. At that time, his relationship with Hitler remained cordial and respectful. Rommel did not yet challenge Hitler's authority, and Hitler in turn admired Rommel as a bold and energetic commander. Their bond was reinforced by shared experience as frontline soldiers in the First World War. Rommel's son later recalled wondering whether he would ever see his father again as he left for Africa, unsure what the future held. In North Africa, Rommel once again led from the front. He believed deeply in personal bravery and visibility, convinced that a commander should share the dangers of his men. British codebreakers, meanwhile, had already cracked Germany's Enigma encryption system, allowing them to read German military communications. Rommel never believed such a sophisticated code could be broken, a fatal assumption that would later contribute to his difficulties. In wartime, any underestimation of an enemy's capabilities can prove disastrous. Rommel's early campaigns in North Africa were spectacular. Within weeks, he drove British forces back across Libya, recapturing territory the Axis had previously lost. His rapid advances stunned the British and earned him admiration even among his enemies. Hitler promoted him to Field Marshal, and Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels was instructed to turn Rommel into a national hero. Handsome, articulate, and photogenic, Rommel became the public face of German military success, a symbol meant to boost morale at home as the war expanded. Rommel's successes granted him freedoms that few German generals enjoyed. In contrast to the rigid control imposed on commanders on the Eastern Front, Rommel often ignored or even tore up orders from Berlin when he disagreed with them. British intelligence, reading intercepted German communications, was frequently baffled when Rommel failed to follow plans they knew had been issued. His unpredictability became one of his greatest strengths. By late 1942, however, the situation in North Africa began to change. British forces received increasing supplies, and the entry of the United States into the war brought overwhelming material superiority to the Allied side. Despite Rommel's brilliance, shortages of fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements crippled his ability to maneuver. He pleaded with German leadership for more resources, but his requests were largely ignored. Hitler viewed North Africa as a secondary theater and believed the war would soon be won elsewhere. As defeats mounted, Rommel's health deteriorated. He suffered from exhaustion, depression, headaches, and jaundice, yet continued to lead his troops in combat. Even as his position worsened, his reputation grew. He was widely regarded as a commander who consistently outmaneuvered his opponents, only retreating when completely overwhelmed. Eventually, he was forced to evacuate North Africa entirely, marking the end of the Axis campaign there. Returning to Germany, Rommel confronted Hitler directly. He told him bluntly that North Africa was lost and that continuing the fight there was pointless. Hitler reacted angrily, questioning Rommel's competence and dismissing his warnings. The exchange left Rommel shaken, and the once cordial relationship between the two men began to unravel. Rommel increasingly felt that his troops had been sacrificed needlessly and that Hitler was living in denial. By 1943, Rommel began to hear disturbing reports of mass executions and atrocities on the Eastern Front. Gradually, rumors of concentration camps and the systematic murder of civilians reached him. These revelations profoundly affected him. He came to believe that the war could not end in any reasonable peace, and that Germany faced moral as well as military catastrophe. His attitude toward Hitler shifted from admiration to deep distrust, and eventually to quiet opposition. Denied another field command in Italy, Rommel was assigned to oversee the defense of Western Europe. Meanwhile, the German defeat at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war. The catastrophic losses suffered there shattered the myth of German invincibility and ensured that the Allies would eventually carry the war into Germany itself. Rommel and Hitler both knew that an Allied invasion of Western Europe was inevitable. Rommel was placed in charge of defending the Atlantic coast. Hitler believed his so-called Atlantic Wall, a chain of fortifications stretching from Norway to Spain, would stop any invasion. Rommel quickly realized that much of it existed only on paper. He believed that the Allies had to be stopped at the water's edge, within the first day of landings, or the war in the West would be lost. Others disagreed, favoring mobile counterattacks inland. Rommel's arguments failed to fully convince the German high command. Determined to prepare as best he could, Rommel strengthened coastal defenses, laid mines, built obstacles, and reinforced bunkers along likely landing beaches. He moved his headquarters closer to the coast, expecting the decisive battle to come soon. Allied deception efforts, particularly Operation Fortitude, successfully convinced German leadership that the invasion would occur at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. Rommel, like most senior German officers, was deceived. Hitler placed enormous faith in Rommel and the Atlantic Wall, yet never personally inspected the defenses. As the spring of 1944 approached, Rommel was increasingly convinced that Germany could no longer win the war. He believed the only hope lay in ending it before the country was destroyed completely. The stage was set for the final and tragic confrontation between the Desert Fox and the regime he had once served so loyally even decades after the guns of World War II fell silent. Erwin Rommel remains one of the most recognizable and debated military commanders of the conflict. Known around the world as the Desert Fox, he earned that reputation not through propaganda alone, but through daring leadership, tactical brilliance, and a relentless willingness to act independently on the battlefield. Yet Rommel's legacy was shaped just as much by his moral struggle and personal honesty as by his victories. In the end, it was not defeat in combat that destroyed him, but his decision to speak the truth to Adolf Hitler, a choice few generals dared to make, and one that ultimately cost Rommel his life. Rommel's son, Manfred Rommel, witnessed firsthand the complicated and often volatile relationship between his father and Hitler. To the young boy, Hitler was initially a distant figure, spoken of with reverence across Germany, while his father appeared calm, disciplined, and devoted to duty. Rommel was a man of contradictions. He could be generous and kind, yet demanding and authoritarian. He inspired fierce loyalty from his troops while remaining deeply skeptical of political ideology. Above all, he was a professional soldier, shaped by the trauma and lessons of the First World War. Rommel had already established himself as a decorated officer during that earlier conflict, earning honors for courage and leadership. When Germany's armed forces were drastically reduced under the Treaty of Versailles, many officers left military life altogether. Rommel chose to remain. He became an instructor, passing on hard-earned battlefield experience to younger soldiers, and steadily rose through the ranks. By the mid-1930s, he had attracted attention not only for his tactical insight, but also for his discipline and efficiency. This visibility brought him into Hitler's orbit, including service as part of Hitler's military escort during the Nuremberg rallies. At this stage, Rommel did not openly challenge Hitler's authority. Like many Germans, he saw in Hitler a figure who promised to restore national pride after years of humiliation and economic hardship. Germany had been stripped of its military strength and international standing, and resentment over the Versailles settlement ran deep. Hitler's speeches tapped into this anger, convincing millions that Germany's revival required strength, unity, and obedience. Rommel, focused on soldiering rather than politics, initially accepted this narrative. By the time Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, launching World War II, Rommel's career was accelerating rapidly. His true genius lay in mobile warfare. In 1940, he was given command of the 7th Panzer Division during the invasion of France. There, he demonstrated a boldness that astonished both allies and enemies. Moving faster than expected, ignoring rigid doctrine, and leading from the front, Rommel drove his division deep into enemy territory, earning the nickname Ghost Division for its speed and unpredictability. The campaign ended with Germany victorious, and Rommel was promoted to lieutenant general. His next assignment would define him forever. In early 1941, Hitler sent Rommel to North Africa to stabilize the collapsing Italian front against the British. Given command of what became the Afrika Korps, Rommel arrived in the desert with limited resources but immense confidence. He thrived in the open terrain, where maneuver and initiative mattered more than rigid planning. His willingness to act without waiting for approval brought immediate success. British forces were driven back, key positions retaken, and Rommel's reputation soared. It was during this period that Rommel became a favorite of Hitler. Nazi propaganda seized upon his image. Handsome, articulate, and victorious, Rommel was presented as the ideal German commander. Joseph Goebbels ensured that Rommel's name and face were known across Germany. Morale at home rose as reports of desert victories filled newspapers and newsreels. Hitler rewarded him with promotion to Field Marshal, the youngest in the German army. Despite the praise, cracks were beginning to form beneath the surface. Rommel led from the front, sharing danger with his men, and they adored him for it. But his independence frustrated German high command. Unknown to Rommel, British intelligence had broken the Enigma code, allowing them to read German communications. Ironically, Rommel's habit of ignoring orders sometimes saved him from disaster, as he frequently acted contrary to plans the British expected him to follow. As 1942 progressed, the tide in North Africa slowly turned. British forces, reinforced by American troops following the United States' entry into the war, gained overwhelming material superiority. Supplies poured into Allied ports while German logistics collapsed under constant air and naval attacks. Rommel repeatedly pleaded for reinforcements, fuel, and aircraft, but Berlin responded with promises instead of action. To Hitler, North Africa had become a sideshow. He believed the war would soon be won elsewhere. Rommel fought on despite exhaustion, illness, and dwindling resources. He suffered from chronic health problems, including jaundice, headaches, and extreme fatigue, yet continued to command in person. Eventually, the imbalance became impossible to overcome. Allied forces broke through, and by May 1943, more than 130,000 German and Italian troops surrendered in Tunisia. The Afrika campaign was over. Rommel returned to Germany disillusioned. In meetings with Hitler, he spoke bluntly, warning that Africa had been lost and that continuing the fight there had been pointless. Hitler reacted angrily, mocking Rommel and questioning his competence. The relationship between them, once warm, now grew cold. Rommel began to feel that his soldiers had been sacrificed for nothing. Around this time, Rommel also began hearing disturbing reports from the Eastern Front. Stories circulated of mass executions, brutal treatment of prisoners, and extermination camps. At first, these rumors were difficult to believe. The scale of the crimes was almost unimaginable. But as evidence accumulated, Rommel's perception of the regime changed fundamentally. He realized that Germany was not merely fighting a war for survival, but had become entangled in a system of unprecedented criminality. By late 1943, Rommel was assigned to defend Western Europe against an expected Allied invasion. Hitler's vision of the Atlantic Wall, a vast chain of fortifications stretching from Norway to Spain, was impressive on paper. In reality, Rommel found it largely incomplete and dangerously inadequate. Unlike Hitler, Rommel understood Allied capabilities. From his experience fighting British and American forces, he knew their strength lay in air power, naval fire support, and logistics. He concluded that the only chance of stopping an invasion was to defeat it at the shoreline within the first 24 hours. Rommel threw himself into the task with characteristic energy. He strengthened defenses, laid millions of mines, designed beach obstacles, improved bunker placement, and insisted on constant training. Though he lacked the resources he wanted, he transformed much of the coastline into a formidable barrier. Still, he knew it would never be enough. Germany no longer controlled the skies or the seas. Meanwhile, the Allies were preparing one of the greatest deceptions in military history. Operation Fortitude convinced German intelligence that the invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. Fake armies, false radio traffic, and coordinated resistance activity reinforced the illusion. Both Hitler and Rommel were deceived. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the invasion of Normandy under the command of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Ironically, Rommel was not in France that morning. Believing bad weather would delay any landing, he had returned to Germany to visit his wife for her birthday and planned to confront Hitler once more with the grim reality of the war. When news of the invasion reached him, he was stunned and furious at his absence. By the time Rommel returned to his headquarters, Allied troops were already ashore in force. Air superiority prevented German armor from moving freely, exactly as Rommel had feared. Within days, it was clear to him that the Western Front was lost. He met Hitler again and urged him to seek peace with Britain and the United States, even suggesting that Hitler step aside if necessary. Hitler refused. He declared that he would never negotiate and would rather see Germany destroyed than surrender power. From that moment, Rommel understood that the war was no longer being fought for Germany's survival, but for Hitler's personal obsession. Rommel wrote a letter stating plainly that the war in the West was lost, and that continuing it would only bring needless destruction. This honesty sealed his fate. Although Rommel opposed assassination on moral and legal grounds, he listened to officers who believed Hitler must be removed. He favored arrest and trial, not murder. Before any decisive action could be taken, Rommel was seriously wounded on July 17, 1944, when his staff car was strafed by Allied aircraft. His injuries ended his active command and removed him from immediate events. 3 days later, an assassination attempt against Hitler failed. In the aftermath, Hitler unleashed a wave of executions. Though Rommel had not participated, his opposition and influence made him dangerous. In October 1944, 2 generals arrived at his home and presented him with a choice: face a show trial that would destroy his family, or take poison and receive a state funeral. Rommel chose death to protect his wife and son. On October 14, 1944, he took cyanide and died within minutes. Nazi propaganda portrayed him as a loyal hero. The truth would emerge only after the war. In the end, Rommel had been right. Germany was destroyed, millions died unnecessarily, and Hitler took his own life in a Berlin bunker. Rommel's courage was not in his battles alone, but in his refusal to lie to himself or his country. He paid for that honesty with his life, leaving behind a legacy defined not only by military brilliance, but by moral resistance in a time of overwhelming darkness.